Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. One of the most popular definitions of democracy is a quote by the 16th President of the United States, Abraham Lincoln, which he defines as the government of the people, by the people, for the people. Elections constitute a live wire that gives real meaning to this system of governance on which great nations have been built, and a cardinal factor of elections is the electioneering campaign. Joining us this morning is a spokesperson of the Atiku Campaign Organisation, SEGUN Showunmi. Good morning. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning. How are you girls?
Great. Very well, thank you. So let's jump right in. The goal is to have a free and fair election next year. What do you think the chances are of the government sort of delivering that? Earlier on in the news program, we were talking about the controversy with the extension of the tenure of the IG, also with this electoral act that has not been passed. How do you assess the possibilities of having a free and fair election?
I think that first thing I want to say is that, thank you, Merry Christmas to all of you, Merry Christmas to our listeners. The statutory responsibility of determining and delivering a free, fair, and transparent and credible election is with INEC. It's just because of the overlap between who provides the money, who has the overriding ability to influence them. That's why we always end up expecting whoever is in charge of the helms of affairs to not interfere. Once the presidency does not interfere with INEC, and once INEC is alive to its own responsibility and understands what it really means when you don't deliver credible elections, I think we'll begin to be successful. In terms of the tenure elongation of most of the service chiefs, it's disturbing beyond the average, because you have to understand that every officer, be them the Navy, the Army, the Air Force, and all of that, the ultimate for them is to be able to control and lead the corps, and they put a lot of service in there, and there is a command and control structure. So when it's time for somebody else to go, the new people that are supposed to take over are kind of like ready, new energy, new excitement. When you keep extending it, you frustrate them. You're probably going to have to end up retiring some of their costmates. You're probably going to also disenfranchise those who are supposed to come behind it. It's just a mess. Systems must be put in place such that we will not need to run on the idea of one strong man. Rather, we'll run on an idea of stable processes, strong processes that can carry the responsibility. I think it's really wrong, and it may obviously suggest that they're trying to put their friends in charge of the process so that they can take some unnecessary advantage there. But I would just hope and pray that they will understand and live up to the expectations of the Nigerian society and their friends in the international community, which is that upon having an election in 2015, where someone who was the incumbent lost an election, and that election transferred power to another party who is the present occupier of the presidency now, when you say the ladder has been moved very high. And so anything short of a credible, a fair, a transparent process will be like an anathema and will be a major disappointment to Nigerians, to the friends of Nigeria. So we'll continue to charge them. I hold the view that we must be careful that we do not undermine all of our processes just because of fear and suspicion. We must look at the details. What tells us that they won't be able to go the right way? Should we be concerned? In terms of the Electoral Act, everything said, it would have been good for the president, this present president, to improve the Electoral Act as his own contribution within his 4-year tenure. Missing that golden chance, it means that nobody is going to remember any deepening of the law that took place under Buhari, unlike all of his predecessors, where Jonathan deepened the law with the Administration of Criminal Justice, where Yar'Adua deepened the law with amnesty, where Obasanjo could deepen the law with EFCC, ICPC, and all that. So what's he adding to it? And when he then begins to say, oh, we don't have time, it's silly, because the present Electoral Act we're using of 2015, Jonathan signed it, President Jonathan signed it just a couple of days before the election, and it worked. But all in all, what we want from them, INEC now, we want a credible election. We want an election that does not seem to undermine the credibility of the verification process. What do I mean? The credibility of the verification process is that the card reader and the card verification of the thumb must be in sync. That's why we created it in the first instance. So when you run a process that allows you to use more incident forms over and above the electronic register and the card and the machine, it means that You have gone to create a lot of structure that can make the system credible, but you have also insisted that you're going to undermine it because you're going to be bending the rules. So all in all, I think, for the sake of our country, we must manage narrative in such a way that we must be constantly hopeful and believe that, yes, when we get to that bridge, we'll cross it. But Nigerians are interested in a fair process. Nigerians want to truly know that they voted who they voted for so that the legitimacy required can be taken by whoever wins. And obviously, since I want Atiku to win. I think Atiku should win.
All right, so you know the peace accord, which was recently signed by your candidate, there are still issues of violence raised even amongst the international community. Do you have any concerns about having peace during the electoral process?
I think that if you recall where we're coming from in 1999, where we are now, there is a tendency for us to, just before we start the election, we start to fire on all cylinders, we start ringing the alarm bells and all that, and even the international community sometimes over-exaggerate the expectation of how Nigeria is going to go into pieces and all that. And somehow, Nigeria has been able to cross each hurdle with minimal challenges. But it is down to the stakeholders, the political gladiators, those who manage narrative, influential people in the society, to keep the temperature a little bit low. All we're trying to do is select someone who's going to lead the country. It's not a war, and we shouldn't, make our country so divided because of politics to the extent that whoever becomes the president now has a legitimate challenge of keeping everybody right. So I think that it's for us to take every of this report seriously. It's for us to look at what we can do to reduce the tension, and it is absolutely necessary for us to call a crime, so that when people know that there are consequences to their actions and that no one is going to allow them to get away with criminality underneath the pretext of politics or electioneering, then you will see that the temperature will reduce, and obviously you beg the Nigerian people to listen to the candidates well, interrogate them, be sure of what represents their wishes for the country, and then calmly just go and cast their vote. It's not as difficult as we make it seem, and we don't need to overheat our own country. Our population is too large. We can't afford an overheating of the Nigerian political space. It's just too unimaginable for our neighbors and for the world. The world can't handle that. They can't even handle the little problems that's happening in the Chad Basin. How are they going to handle a destabilized Nigeria because of what? Politics? No, that shouldn't happen.
Let's talk a bit more about your principle now. Atiku Abubakar, the dust raised over age going into this election has refused to settle. We've seen other presidential candidates, for instance, the African Action Congress, Omoyele Sowore, milking this, saying, age really plays a role and you must have nothing else to offer at this age and let the fresh, young people, vibrant people come on board. Just last week, Atiku Abubakar was in Lagos at a town hall meeting with young people where he made a statement that his minister for youth would be under age 30. Now, this has also raised some controversy, saying you do know that this is somewhat pacifying the young people to vote for you. How is Atiku Abubakar handling this age pressure?
First of all, let me say to Nigerians and to young people, if there is any candidate that gets the need to quickly get Nigerians ready, young Nigerians ready, to be able to take on the reins of power and run the country, is Atiku Abubakar. It's part of the reasons why he keeps saying we'll give at least 40% to young people. It's part of the reason why he said anybody who's going to even be in charge of managing the affairs of young people will be under 30 and as a minister. The thinking behind it is that we have wasted a lot of time in preparing young people for leadership. There are issues on how to run government. There are administrative issues. There are the tribal tensions within the country. There is the unemployment gap. There are things that you need someone with a bit of experience to stabilize the country and keep it calm. You can't have a raging war running through the Northeast, running through some other areas in the country, and then you say to yourself that, that's the kind of country you want to yield to an inexperienced, untested greyhound, running the risk that he's still going to have to deal with all of those tribal challenges and all that. So what we want them to do, and which I also sign up to, is that, yes, Atiku is experienced. Let's get them to come and fix what they probably, as a collective within their age group, made a mess of, stabilize it, bring in young people to be mentored and prepared for leadership. You know why? Because age and biology is going to rob us of all of those people who have been holding the country to ransom in terms of leadership. But we are in an emergency. We need to prepare young people fast, and we need to make them come into the country and begin to see the country for what it really is. You know what? All of the countries they want to mirror, like France, who has a young president, and Canada and all of that, they forget one fundamental thing that is there that differentiates those countries from ours, and that is that they have very strong social systems that can allow a president, however young and qualified, to be in charge of the country and have such powerful administrative structure behind him that is stable and have been stable for a while. So if a young president wants to make a mistake in France, for example, the structures within the country will compel him to behave in a certain manner and safeguard the larger population. But in a country like Nigeria, if some young person makes a mistake, the consequences are way too dire. So I want to say that, yes, Atiku is 72, the present president is 76 by his own admittance, so there's a 4-year gap in between them. So Atiku is really still much younger than him. And also that Atiku will come into the presidency. He will more than likely do one term, because he said he wants to do just one term. And he has also committed to opening up the economy and opening up the political space and bring young people there. They need to come and see what's on the inside. If a president like Buhari, who has been trying to be president for so many years, can come on board in 2015 and is still basically complaining about what he saw, what he thought was there, how do you think a young person will handle it? So I believe that young people, I'm young myself, a little bit young, we all need to take back our country, but we need to take it back in a systematic, well-planned manner. And God help us, 2023 will surely be the year of the young.
What about the other bête noire against Atiku?
What's that?
Corruption allegations, persistent corruption allegations, described in lurid detail by his former boss, Chief Obasanjo, in print media, in his biography, several times.
Okay.
This continues to be a slur against your principal. Can you address this?
Thank goodness this is coming from you, my dear. In 1992, the very watershed election that everybody considers to be one of the best in our country's history, which of course they deprived our man, your dad, from getting to the presidency, happened in 1992. The primaries of that election, by any definition, your father was a very, very wealthy and successful man. So his election would have been probably well-funded. The man who came second, Babagana King Gibe, was also a very experienced person. He came second. And Atiku Abubakar in 1992, who had never had anything to do with the government coffers, came third. And they had a lot of candidates. It therefore means that if we just walk backwards, you will know that he couldn't have been as poor as they're making him out to be before he was able to even be a candidate, run the structure and all that. What Atiku has suffered from in this country is that there has been an elite conspiracy where they just like look for something to hang on one of them, and then all of them start pointing their fingers at one person. The question you will ask is, of Atiku that we know worked in the customs and will probably get the advantage of any other custom officers that we get at that time, who went on to be a very successful businessman, doing other things in the maritime industry and all that, who went on to be a governorship candidate and won a governorship election in 1999 before he got the coffers of government, who went on to be vice president and has been out of that office since 2007. So more than 12 years, 11, 12 years now, he's been out of anything that has to do with government money. If you can agree the labeling of such a person as corrupt, then what call ye all those ones who are even labeling him? In the case of Chief Obasanjo, he's my dad. I love him, and you know that he's very strong. He has his views that are very strong. But there is a challenge with passionate people and the usage of adjectival gymnastics. When a passionate person like Obasanjo is a bit rubbed the wrong way, the challenge is that the adjectives he's going to use to communicate his anger at that time may be too heavy. And by the time he now wants to undo that, the person that he has used that adjective to qualify has to carry that burden for a while. So maybe there might have been issues, but those issues do not reflect any great grand landslide. That's on the first part. The second part on the corruption issue. Look, Atiku has never been one of those sycophants who always stay with the powers that be. He had the temerity to fight for democracy when everybody was fighting for democracy. He had the temerity to be even the candidates in Obasanjo's vice presidency, and they were locked in a battle for a long time. He left and he's been out of government up until now, and he's never taken it easy. If he had such a big corruption issue that could be proved, or any big thing that would show you the smoking gun, they would have charged him. If they are not charging him, yet they are sustaining the narrative, you have to know that it's only political contrived for people who want to keep somebody that they wonder, how is he able to do it? How is he able to sustain? Atiku has contested, has tried to put his hand in trying to be president like 5 times now. Do you know how expensive that really is? And when you think about the kinds of funds that are going to just the planning of the logistics, it's normal for people to ask. But you know what? We are not a nation that insists that people cannot work hard and make money. If your dad, one of the greatest financial person that had money in this country, philanthropy and all of that, ran an election in this present Nigeria today with what we have made of our country, you'll be amazed at how you'll be wondering, is it my daddy I'm describing? Because they will leave the substance and start saying because he has money, it means he's corrupt. But you know what? What is before Nigeria now is what can Atiku bring to the table? Atiku is a consummate job creator. He understands how business works. So he will create jobs for Nigeria. Nigeria needs to create jobs because we have a very big population and we have an unemployment challenge. At the last statistics, they said 23.3 million Nigerians are out of work. That's too dangerous for a nation of 120, 180, 200 million. Atiku is a businessman. He can open up the economy and allow private sector details to come and help grow the economy so everybody can plug in. Atiku is a detribalized Nigerian. He's more detribalized than anybody. He has no choice. In his veins are children from Yoruba people, from Igbo people, from businesses in the South. So for someone like Atiku, it would be an anathema if he were to sit down in the government and become parochial. Then more interestingly, the major challenge we have in security in this country is the management of our own borders. We cannot be the biggest country in Africa, and yet everybody comes in and slaughter us anyhow. It means that you need somebody that has an understanding of how the border works so we can strengthen our own borders and ensure that we can keep away criminals and keep away small and light arms. Atiku spent the first 20 years of his life working in the custom. That puts him in good stead to be able to solve that problem. You know why? If the soldiers have not been able to tame it, you better bring someone that understands the working of the borders to come and read the Riot Act to our neighbors and tell them, enough is enough. We will not be a big brother to you while we are an irresponsible parent to our own children. Therefore, Atiku talks about restructuring. Atiku is passionate about, you know why? Because after some time, if you reflect on Nigeria, you'll ask yourself, why is it that everybody that we give our country to cannot enjoy our support for a long time? If all of them seem to be failing according to our own narrative, then we need to look at the structure. Is there a reason why they are not doing as well as our expectations are? And if anybody is talking about restructuring and is ready to work on restructuring and give us a federalism that can work and make sense, and we can snap out of this feeding bottle economy where everybody just runs to Abuja, takes the money, governors just misbehave all over the place and nobody's taking them to account, then you need to be backing an Atiku Abubakar.
All right, let's move over to the presidential debate.
Okay.
Yeah, there's been a lot of controversies, as you know, whether or not President Buhari would do the contest for the presidential debate. I'd like to know if your candidate will opt out if Buhari does not participate in the presidential debate.
There is a clustering that has taken place in our country in politics now. You have about 90-something political parties, and a lot of them are saying they have presidential candidates. Some of these presidential candidates of this party don't even have candidates for governors across the 36 states. They don't have senators, they don't have House of Rep, they don't have House of Assembly. Therefore, that clustering must be declustered. You must separate it and ask, who are the main challengers to this conversation of 2019? And you will quickly begin to see that you can move them to, if you are generous, maybe about 5. And if you move them to about 5, you can still move them a little bit higher, and then you can say it's a straight fight between a little to the left and a little to the right. And that's APC versus PDP. That's Buhari versus Atiku. Now, if you're going to have a meaningful conversation, not just put about 20 people on the stage and everybody's just doing yappity yap, making so much hot air without the capability to deliver on them or don't have a real chance in that election, then you want to bring Atiku to the table and bring Buhari to the table. Why? Because they must come to public space and take ownership of their own campaign promises. The era of saying, Atiku will do this, Atiku will do this, Atiku will do this, and then Atiku becomes president and says, he didn't say that. Or Buhari will say, maybe Festus, my friend, is saying, Buhari will do this, Buhari will do this, and then Buhari becomes president and say, I didn't say that. We need them to come to the public space and come and be interrogated on precisely what they want to do, not just what they say they want to do. The major question for the debate is how. For us Nigerians now, we must be concerned that we have reduced elections to a ritual where the important things are glossed over. And if Buhari, His Excellency, the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, President Muhammadu Buhari will come for the debate, Atiku will come. If President Muhammadu Buhari will not come for the debate, I do not believe he won't come. I think that people are just stereotyping and generally making their own assumption. If Buhari comes to the debate, guess what? I actually think he's going to give a good account of the debate. I've heard him speak. I've watched what he says. I've seen how measured he was. I saw him at the National Assembly when they were booing him. He was calm. He was stellar. He was very military and very precision. So I'm thinking that it's not going to be as simple a debate as that. It's going to be a good debate. And I know Atiku. Atiku speaks based on a lot of ponderings and research on it. So when you ask Atiku a question and you are not gagging him, Atiku will give you that which comes from the soul. So I believe that Nigerians really need to ask both of them to come for the debate. However, if they have to drag any one of them on the wheelchair, bring the other one plugged to IV drips, and come and talk to us because you want to rule us. And if they are going to both be available, Nigeria's democracy will be the best for it.
If he's not available, would Atiku?
We will take it, we will consider it. Who are we debating with? If we come to the debate table and we're going to be listening and chopping and talking with those that have very little chance in the election, it will be like we brought the main challenger and then we brought a lot of kindergartens to come and start throwing pebbles at conversation. It doesn't make so much sense. But I'm not saying he won't come. I have no power to determine what he will say he will do. He may just look at it and say, okay, Buhari is not coming, granted. Let me just go there and let these people know that I'm able to be president with or without Buhari's debate. So we will take that when we get to that. But for now, I'll just plead with everybody and you members of the fourth referendum of the state to encourage both of them to come. They are the ones Nigerians want to hear. Nigerians are tired of putting leaders in charge that then becomes a frustrated hope. And you know what my fear is? My fear is that once you start to do participatory democracy, and people start putting leaders and getting disappointed, putting leaders and getting disappointed, you are itching the country into chaotic revolution. Because after a while, nothing anybody says is going to be believed. And therefore, we need to have our leaders be accountable. They need to take ownership of their promises and their manifestos. We need to grill them. They're not doing us a favor. They're actually asking us to give them the right to lead over us. And any one of us could have been president. So if you want to be president, you need to come and answer to the Nigerian people. That's my view on that.
Okay, some Nigerians will argue with you that really they're tired of the established parties and you seem to be undermining the new parties. However, my question is, you've raised it here, the how of these manifestos. You talked about the man who can fix the job, who can fix security, being Atiku. But let's look at restructuring, which is also germane, and your candidate seems to take that seriously. But what form is this restructuring taking? You're lifting 50 million people out of poverty. How are you doing that? What is the how of all of this?
Okay. I'd wanted you to leave that to Atiku to come and answer, because if I answered it and then they got to the debate and Atiku answered it, you guys are going to say, let me tell you some of the snippets. I won't go into the detail. He's the one that wants to be president. I'm only campaigning for him. I'm his spokesman. I'll answer questions, but if I start giving you too much details of the how, then what are you going to ask him when it comes for the debate? But on the restructuring, so that you know that he's not playing lip service, I once asked him, so Your Excellency, do you realize how difficult it is to restructure Nigeria? Now that you say you want to do it, I'm not going to be part of you saying you want to do something that you don't want to do. And then he said, "Shall we calm down?" First of all, we have a lot of documents from previous constitutional conference. We can take that document and do what you call an affix. An affix is you do like a congruence. You take out all those things that are commonalities in that congruence and put it aside that, okay, the first constitutional conference, second one, the 2014 one of Jonathan, these are the things that have been consistently running through. These are the ones that is neither here nor there. You can set up a very high-powered presidential committee to look at it now and say, what exactly are the ones that Nigerians are asking for urgently? The ones that Nigerians are asking for urgently that fall within the concurrent list. What do I mean by concurrent list? That means by our present arrangement, those things that the federal government can do, the state can do, the local government can do, I can, by an executive order, sign those ones to the state if there is concomitancy with all the others. The ones that require legislative adjustment, like how do we do the structure of state police and all of that, Atiku tells me, that the greatest experience he learned and got under Obasanjo was the ability to work with the legislator. That if you respect them, they are not as unreasonable as you make them seem. But they are an independent arm of government. And there's a way you reach out to your equals in a democracy. He believes that his numerous years at being a politician's politician has afforded him the opportunity to call them to the table and say, gentlemen, we have a duty to bestow for Nigeria and bequeath for the next generation a framework that can work for it and they can take ownership of. These are the things they are asking for. How do you say? And he believes that a good number of the people in the country, if that be what they've asked for consistently over many constitutional conferences, may also buy into it. So it begins to get a lot easier. Look, apart from just being silly, what is the reason for a nation that is dealing with the kind of crisis we're dealing with around security to say to itself, it will never allow state police? Why? Because of one piece of paper called the Constitution. We didn't create a Constitution so that we won't solve problems. So that part of the Constitution must necessarily yield. For it to yield, you need to come up with a framework of how do other countries have a state police, a county police, and a federal police, and how do they work in sync? These are the things. But to be obstinate and upstandish and insisting that no way, it's not right. We cannot legislate Nigeria to become the backwater economy in Africa. We must do everything humanly possible to legislate Nigeria to become the driver of growth in Africa. Why? Because by our sheer size and the human capital development we have in this country, it is our destiny to do. And any leader that's willing to try, we must give him the vote, we must back him up. You know why? We also have an opportunity to vote him out if he doesn't do what he says he's going to do. We cannot reinforce failures. We cannot reinforce governments who make promises and don't keep them. And I'm not being silly here. I'm saying that that's what makes the franchise we have in a democracy, is that power. We have to say, okay, we are hearing you, we give you the vote now, all right, go and be president for a couple of years. Luckily, you'll soon come back in 4 years' time. If you haven't met some of your benchmarks, every election is a referendum for the man in charge. If the man in charge can't come to the table that, I promised you this, I've done it. I promised you this, I've done it. I promised you this, I've done it. Then giving him the country back is basically usurping that right, that secret right that you said when you opened this program, where it's government of the people, for the people, and by the people. We cannot continue to fool ourselves. Our country has to be in a hurry. Our neighbors in Africa are beginning to do well. Rwanda is doing financial inclusion better than us. Ghana is beginning to show promise, and so many other African nations. Now tell me, what is our excuse? We have better humans in terms of human capital development. Every country of the world you go, every Ivy League country you go to, England, America, MIT, China, anywhere you go, you will find out that even in their institutions, their academic institutions, Nigerians are really doing well. So if you have the people, you have the climate, you have the landmass, and you're also lucky to have some hydrocarbon that you can use as, like your seed money to get your country together, then you cannot be failing only on parochial leadership or leadership that is not prepared for the job.
So now you've highlighted the limitations of our Constitution. Is another constitutional amendment that you might be looking at to extend the current term of the president? Because it's interesting that your campaign manifesto is proposing a 6-year plan for a 4-year term. So are you is Atiku of the opinion that each president of Nigeria should serve a 6-year term rather than a 4-year term?
A lot of people play with that idea, but I don't think that that's what's on Atiku's mind.
So why the 6-year
Now,
plan?
I'm trying to explain it to you. When you put a very strong team together, made up of Nigerians from wherever they can come from, some of the best young people and all of that, and they start to design agriculture, they found out that it was foolhardy and irresponsible to just snap the button and put it off just because of the 4-year tenure. They drew the line to continue to the gestation period of some of this policy. It doesn't mean that it is expected that the person who starts it has to complete it. The whole idea is to give Nigeria a document that all Nigerians can buy into. And that's why that document was put in public space. It's put there so that perhaps we can have our own contract with ourselves. And if it's taking us, want to do rail for 30 years, would we then write in the document of multimodal transportation initiative only of 4 years, when we know that the first 4 years must do this, the next 4 years must do this, the next 10 years must do this? Our prayer, my personal prayer, is that we will play politics when it is time for politics. We'll campaign for our respective candidates when it is time to campaign for them. We will do a process that is credible, fair, and reasonably, acceptable to everybody, the result. But that at the center of everything must be the development of Nigeria. So Atiku has not, the document says 6 years in some places, doesn't mean he's looking for a 6-year single tenure. No. What it means is that some of these ideas will run up to 6 years before it becomes sustainable. Don't forget, the central theme of that document is the liberalization of the space. So that if I said, Tundu, come and take the marine industry and come and fix it, it's in your genes, would I then say, oh, if you come and tell me that, no, okay, where your marine industry is, it will take us about 6 years to do it, this is what we're doing the first year, will I then say, oh, Tundu, stop it at the 4th year because I don't want you to run into the complete 6-year tenure that you think will be required? So Nigerians have to be, I understand, they are very skeptical, but they need to begin to be a bit more optimistic and believable. It is as you wish it that you see it. He's not trying to do tenure elongation, no way. It's not as simple as that to do, and he's not childish enough to think that he's going to be able to make smoked sandwich from cassava. So he's not trying to take, he's going to take the 4 years that's available. If the constitution gets adjusted, more than likely the way these things work, even if they did a constitutional adjustment that says they want to do 6 years, they may likely say the person that is even superintending over that process is excluded. Let's not, believe that everything is make-believe. Some things are truly real.
It's not necessarily a cynical view to have a 6-year term, because in reality we have a 3.5-year term. We don't actually have a 4-year term.
Thank you.
So it's not necessarily a cynical position.
Yeah, I agree. Well, let's touch on the economy here.
Okay.
Yeah, in your candidate's manifesto, he's promised to grow the GDP from the current less than 2% that it is right now to 10%. How does your candidate intend to do that?
Okay. If you remember in 1999, the GDP of the country too was also in single digits. They grew it. In fact, it was a pariah. We were really not existing. They had done the greatest sacrilege to the spirit and the soul of the Nigerian by obviously not allowing June 12 to stand, and it had serious consequences on everything. But by the time the 1999 cycle came, they started to reflate the economy, opening it up, liberalize space, and within a short time, they started having 6%, and then they got 7%, and then eventually grew to about double digits until we became the biggest. We did the recalibration of the economy, we became the biggest in Africa, and everybody claimed that we're the biggest in Africa. Policy consistency matters because business and capital behaves in such a way that there are too many locations in the world where people can take their money to. If you make your space too difficult to be invested in, people will take their money to do capital flight and go do their business elsewhere. And you have to go and start begging them anew. So what he's saying is that if you want to grow the Nigerian economy well, the first thing you have to tell yourself is that, look, we have tried this for close to 60 years. Government has not been a very good business entity. Almost all the businesses that government owe, over and above not producing value, also produce unnecessary debt, and there's always a lot of sleaze and corruption because everybody's attitude is that government business is nobody's business. Some of these businesses, when it gets into private or when private people are doing something similar, it's sustainable. So he believes that if we start to liberalize and begin to remove government a little bit more, you can do that. If you look at what Ghana is doing now, and that's a smart country, they started reducing taxes. They're not reducing taxes because they don't want money. It's like the chicken and the egg. If you reduce taxes, you may think you're losing income immediately, but you may actually be giving capital back to those who can expand businesses and take more people onto the economic chain, and then you can then tax the people and all of that. In another way, it's like you're giving them money so that they can grow the economy. So Atiku believes that if we can do the right things, if we can let government become more serious, if we can reduce the interference of government in business, if we stop acting like government is some kind of police officer that will just be making life difficult for businesses. If government has an issue with business, government must be willing to have a business-like dialogue to solve the problem, because overall interest of government must be employment and growth. And that if you're able to do that as your central policy, you may begin to grow the economy because they also have expertise. The other thing is about the jobs we want to create. Now, if you're able to lose 23.3 or so...
23.1%.
Yes, I'm just saying. 23.1, if you're able to lose 23.1, 23. Just trust in the number. We may even count it. We may even find out that it's about 25 if you check properly. If you're able to lose, say, 20%, let's be on the safe side. If you're able to lose 20% of jobs in such a short time. What makes you think you cannot reverse that and double it? If you reverse that and you doubled it, do you know the number you have? So some of these things, to a willing mind that has vision, all is possible. In any case, a manifestation and a promise for development going to the future is an expectation of a hope of what can be done and what all Nigerians must plug into. We must pull ourselves up by the bootstraps. We cannot be a young population with a median age of 18 and be saying that we're having huge unemployment issue. What happens if it snaps? We have not even been able to manage the insurgencies in where we have seen them. We have not managed the issues between the headman and the farmer. What happens if we now have a snap? Therefore, we must take it serious. Obi's manifesto, I've read it too. She's actually even moving the numbers to close to 80 million. The reason why they're talking like that, it's not like they're going to sit down in their houses and start telling everybody, come and start taking employment letter from government. No, it's because thinkers, those who think, know that critical things can be done in different sectors of the economy. Let me give you an example. If the government of Atiku Abubakar decides that it wants to institute grants for people that want to do business, do you know just how much growth you can have from that? If the government of Atiku Abubakar and Peter Obi decides that, look, we're going to call in the banks and we're going to ask them, gentlemen that run banks, how are you making profit that is outpacing the real sector? You could not have been investing in the real sector and be making this kind of profit while there's no growth. You need to now start doing banking. Otherwise, we'll get the regulators to come at you. That means that in one strategic leadership, desire, and implementation, you can get the banks to start lending to the real sector. Where is the Nigeria real sector? The Nigeria real sector is the small and medium-scale businesses. Some of them just need doubling of their capital to grow. Now, if you can double the capital of somebody that's working with 1 million, and you give him an additional capital, which is a grant that is going to pay back of another 1 million. So that means that in one day, he can open it up. He may not be able to employ 5 more people, but he may employ 2 more. He may be able to open up more. That is how to grow an economy. Not this embarrassing trade down money that reduces the vice president and otherwise supposedly intellectual vice president into a thrift collector where he goes into the market to be harvesting PVCs. It's an embarrassment to our own intellectual capability as a people. It's not sustainable. Can we run that program for the next 10 years without batting an eyelid? So that's not how to grow an economy.
You know, the ruling party says these problems are not in isolation. There's a background to the situation in Nigeria.
What's the background?
Where, you know, we did not save for a raining day. And they accuse the PDP of not doing that. And they have had to do more with less. They say their policies and their programs are showing for it. But let me take you again to the document of your candidate,
yes,
where you talked about 25% budget for health, 15% for education. That's about 40% already of the budget. Recently, your candidate has flawed the 2019 budget, calling it a document with no realistic achievement. But when you look at this and what we have on ground, where goes the funding for infrastructure, security, servicing of debts? How does your candidate hope to do this?
Okay. First is first. Every budget is an expectation of what you want to do if the fundamentals come out to be right. You hope you get your benchmark for all these days. If it goes up, okay. If it doesn't go up, you have to adjust it. And you have to try as much as possible to be able to deliver on your own realistic budget. The problem with the handlers of the country is that they have no imagination. They don't really get it, that all of the money they say they are taking and throwing into all of the things they claim they are throwing it into is not investing enough in the human capital development. If you don't invest in the human capital development of a large population like ours, it means that technically you are not preparing yourself for profit in the future. So if you take about 25% for health and put all of those things in education and all that, it may seem like, oh, where's the money going? But you already know that the children of that particular process are the ones that are going to create the value you need. So I think, as an idea, you must, for Africa, for Nigeria, you must be more interested in putting a whole lot more in human capital development and for infrastructure and all of that they are yapping about. The world has moved on. Infrastructure now can be financed by private sector initiative. It does not mean that when you say you're bringing private sector initiative to fund infrastructure, that maybe it will not be well done or it will not be well managed. We have a few success stories here and there. There are infrastructure capacity that is available in some other country that you can bring over to come and help out. But if you insist, like they are insisting, that you're running a 7 trillion budget and you claim you're spending so much on infrastructure, do you know what's supposed to be happening in the Nigerian economy? The multiplier effect of that, their infrastructure spending, assuming they were spending right, or they were spending transparently, or they were spending honestly, should have made the Nigerian economy bigger. Because for every time you want to do infrastructure, there is the value chain, the person that's supplying, the people that are working. It can take a lot more people. If a nation's economy is in depression, economists will tell you that even if it means digging a hole and filling it back, something to just get the, the economic cycle working is what you need to do. But when they tell you they're running a budget that is as large as that, and everybody in the country is crying, inflation is galloping, people can't even buy the food stuff they normally use. This is Christmas. You hardly see anybody tell you, oh, like we used to, show kindness to people. Only God knows how the Nigerians are going to celebrate Christmas now. The salary they get has been eroded by inflation, and you don't think that there's an urgent need for you to give them a living wage. The fuel they buy is higher than they used to, so they don't have a choice. The transportation cost has increased, the housing cost, and yet you're acting as though you don't understand that you are not in government to sit in your office and make life difficult for Nigeria. Your responsibility actually is to be in office and constantly ask yourself, what can we do to make Nigeria better? And I assure you, Atiku will get Nigeria to be better.
On that note, we're going to just go for a short break. And when we come back, we'll have more from Mr. SEGUN Showunmi after the break. Stay with us.